So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, the Detroit Lions defense was very poor to start the season, to say the very least. They were the major reason why the Detroit Lions were 1-6 to start the season, and not only were they the worst defense in the NFL, allowing the most points, forcing the fewest turnovers, and getting the fewest sacks, they were one of the worst defenses, if not the very worst defense, statistically in NFL history. They were allowing over 30 points per game, and they just weren't very good. I mean, they lost a game by scoring over 45 points. They lost a game 48-45. They lost 38-35 in week 1 to the Eagles. I mean, they did not know how to stop people. They did not know how to force turnovers, and they were not very good at forcing said ball away from the defense. However, since week 9 of the Detroit Lions season, really since one particular player returned from injury, the Detroit Lions defense has been very good. They've actually, since week 9, been a top 10 statistical defense in terms of sacks, negative plays, points allowed, as well as turnovers, and they are one of the big reasons the Lions have been on a 5-1 winning streak over the past month and a half. But what caused this major turnaround in the defense? You could point to a lot of things. You could point to health. You could point to scheme. You could point to development or coaching changes. But there's one player in particular that coincides with the really poor start and the very strong finish to the Detroit Lions season, and one player that makes a clear difference on the defensive side of the ball, even if on the stat sheet it might not be showing so. That player, and the player we're talking about today, the unsung hero and the forgotten player of this defense, is defensive lineman John Cominsky. Now, John Cominsky was a waiver wire pickup. He was cut in the preseason by the Atlanta Falcons, and Brad Holmes decided to use his number one priority waiver wire to acquire John Cominsky, beating out several other NFL teams, about a third of the league, who ended up putting in a waiver wire transaction for him as well. But the Lions ended up winning out and getting their guy from the waiver wire. John Cominsky, if you look at his base stats on the season through 10 games, doesn't look incredibly impressive, right? He has 11 pressures, 5 quarterback hits, 2 sacks, as well as 2 passes defended on the season, which is a pretty good rotational guy, but doesn't really warrant or doesn't really seem like it would be this major impact player. Doesn't seem like it would necessarily make or break a defense if you're to have this guy on the field or not have this guy on the field. But if you look deeper at John Cominsky, you look deeper at the defense with and without John Cominsky, it is a drastic and wild change that you wouldn't expect from a player that doesn't put up major statistics like a guy in John Cominsky. Now, the Lions are 6-4 when Cominsky plays. They have lost to the Eagles early in the season, and then they beat the Washington Commanders, and then John Cominsky got hurt for 4 to 5 weeks, where he missed the Vikings game, he missed the Seattle game, he missed the New England game, he missed the Dallas game, and returned against Miami, where the defense started to look a little bit better. Now, if you look at the time John Cominsky missed this year, from the time he left the game versus the Washington Commanders to his return in a limited role to the Dallas Cowboys, the Lions over that 4-week span got 1 sack, and it came on a free rusher from Alex Anzalone. The defensive line had 0 pressures, they had 0 sacks, they did not get home, and they did not affect the quarterback once. In that time span, the Lions did not win a game, including allowing 30 points to the New England Patriots and their third-string quarterback, allowing 48 points to the Seattle Seahawks and Geno Smith, as well as allowing 26 points to the Dallas Cowboys in Dak Prescott's first true game action since he broke his thumb in week 1 of the NFL season. The Lions lost all 3 of these games in fairly impressive fashion and not in a good way. They lost all of these games in major blowouts. They lost all of these games in really bad ways, and they just weren't a very good defense. However, John Cominsky returned versus the Miami Dolphins, and the Lions ended up getting a few pressures, and even in his limited return versus the Dallas Cowboys, the pass rush looked better. Aiden Hutchinson got home, which he hadn't done since week 2 when John Cominsky was rushing alongside him. The defensive line got pressure. Josh Paschal looked good for the first time. Aiden Hutchinson looked really good for the first time in a while, and the Lions got home. The Lions forced a takeaway. The Lions got some sacks. They forced 3 and outs early, and they really made the Dallas offense struggled for a large majority of that game when John Cominsky returned. Now, going back to the game against Miami, the Lions, of course, lost this game, but they put themselves in a situation to win. And if the Lions offense was able to score just a single field goal in the second half of that game, the Lions likely walk away with a victory. If they score a touchdown, they very likely walk away with a victory versus the Miami Dolphins in that high-powered offense. And then Green Bay came to town, and John Cominsky really started getting back in. He really started seeing more snaps, and in a defensive slugfest, they beat Green Bay. And then they go to Chicago, where yes, it's a high-scoring game, and you give up 30 points to the Chicago Bears, but when key plays needed to be made, the defense made them. And yeah, it wasn't John Cominsky necessarily, but John Cominsky was a huge part of Aiden Hutchinson's one-on-one sack versus the Bears to really ice the game. John Cominsky was being double-teamed on the sack on Justin Fields to end the game, where Julian Okwara hit him twice and Alex Anzalone hit him once. John Cominsky was being double-teamed on that play. And he, again, didn't make the play, but without him being there, that play does not happen, right? You go forward to the next game. You go on to look at Buffalo, and yeah, they lost that game, but they held one of the most talented offenses in the NFL to just 28 points, only losing by a field goal. You go to the New York Jets, where they absolutely shut down Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones, in large part to the role that John Cominsky played. And then, of course, you have games like the Minnesota Vikings, where John Cominsky was incredibly crucial. You have games against Jacksonville, where he had one of his passes defended, and actually, I believe, had a few, and I believe actually had 3 quarterback pressures in that game alone. John Cominsky is the unsung hero of this defense, right? And I mean, yes, he's not the sole reason the defense is better, right? You can point to progression of Hutchinson and Paschal and Houston and some of the other young players on this defense. You can point to coaching changes such as Aubrey Pleasant. You can point to, just coaching decisions being changed by maybe Aaron Glenn to run less zero blitz and to, change up some things schematically. But those things don't happen without John Cominsky, right? You can't change up your defense without John Cominsky, because without John Cominsky, you were getting no pressure and you were getting no sacks. Without John Cominsky, Aiden Hutchinson wasn't getting to the quarterback. Without John Cominsky, you weren't stopping the run. Therefore, you had to run more zero. You had to be more aggressive on defense, and you had to really trust your cornerbacks who were not holding up in coverage. So yes, there were firings that were made, and the cornerbacks are playing better because of it, but the Lions are getting more pressure since that firing happened. Yes, Aaron Glenn changed up the defensive scheme and is running less zero blitz and running it at more opportune times, right? Isn't necessarily allowing that big play to be there unless he really, really has to, but you can't change up your defensive play calling without John Cominsky being that plug up the middle. And Aiden Hutchinson, yes, he has developed, and yes, he has gotten significantly better, but Aiden Hutchinson, a lot of his sacks come when John Cominsky is being double teamed. A lot of his sacks come from when John Cominsky gets pressure and helps Aiden Hutchinson to the quarterback. And I'm not saying Hutchinson doesn't earn his sacks. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve his sacks, because Hutchinson has been great this season. But when Cominsky's not on the field, Aiden Hutchinson's double teamed, if not triple teamed, every single time. So John Cominsky, despite maybe not being the most impactful player, or statistically, maybe despite not being the most well-known player, and despite not really hearing his name all that often, John Cominsky makes this defense work. John Cominsky opens up one-on-one opportunities for Houston and Hutchinson and the Okwara brothers when they were healthy. And when he's not there, those opportunities rarely occur. John Kaminsky is the unsung hero of this defense. This defense does not make a historic jump without John Kaminsky. This defense and this team does not start winning close football games without John Kaminsky and his impact on the defensive line, and yet nobody knows his name, right? Everybody knows Kirby Joseph, everybody knows Malcolm Rodriguez and Aiden Hutchinson and James Houston and Aleem McNeil, and yet John Kaminsky seems to be a player that not everybody knows. John Kaminsky seems to be a player that everybody seemingly forgets about, even though he is the heart and soul of this defense. He is the key that makes this defense efficient, and he is the major reason why this defense is so much better later in the season. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below about John Kaminsky. I'd be very curious what you guys think. How do you feel like his impact has helped the Lions? Do you think there are other players that maybe have done the same thing that aren't getting talked about? I'd be very curious what you guys think down in the comments below. But with all that being said, that is all for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.